If you ever studied for hours and felt like nothing stuck, you're not alone. If you ever reread a chapter 3 times and still can't explain it clearly, you're not behind. And if you ever thought, maybe I'm just not good at this, let me say clearly, learning doesn't feel hard because you lack ability. It often feels hard because you're using strategies that feel productive but don't actually produce retention. Today, we're going to reframe that. Welcome to Learning Reframed, Education Without the Noise. I'm Dr. Ken Feldman, and this episode is about something almost everyone misunderstands: why learning feels harder than it should be, and what actually makes it work. Learning is not complicated, but the way we approach it often is. Let's simplify it. It's the illusion of learning. Most learners rely on strategies that feel comfortable: rereading notes, highlighting important topics. They look back, the entire page is yellow, watching the same explanation over and over again, and reviewing all the material right before the exam. These feel productive because they create a level of familiarity. But being familiar is not mastery. Just because something looks familiar doesn't mean you can retrieve it, apply it, or even explain it. That gap between feeling familiar and retrieval is where frustration lives. Learning feels hard because we mistake exposure for understanding. What actually strengthens learning? There are 4 evidence-based principles that consistently improve retention and, in turn, understanding. They're not flashy, they're not complicated, but they work. The first, active retrieval. Active retrieval means pulling information out of your memory without looking at your notes. Close the book and ask yourself, what were the 3 main arguments? What were the key terms? And how would I explain this to someone else? If you struggle to answer those, it's not failure. That's learning happening. Retrieval shows you what you know and what you don't. So instead of rereading, test yourself. That small mental effort is what strengthens memory. The next, spaced repetition, spaced practice. Spacing means reviewing material over time instead of cramming into one long session. Most learners wait until they feel ready to review the material. But spacing works differently. It works best when you revisit the material just as you're beginning to forget it. That slight struggle, that moment of wait, what was that again, is exactly what builds long-term retention. Learning is less about intensity and more about timing. Short sessions, repeated over days or weeks, are far, far more powerful than one long marathon session. The next is elaboration. Elaboration means asking deeper level questions. Why does this work? How does this connect? And when would this apply? And what would happen if this were different? When you elaborate, you're not just memorizing, you're building learning structure. This level of understanding deepens when information connects to something else. Interleaving. Interleaving means mixing related concepts instead of studying one block at a time. So instead of all chapter 1 problems, then all chapter 2 problems, and go on, try mixing concepts. Think of it like cross-training for the brain. When learners mix ideas, they must recognize patterns and differences, and that's what real understanding requires. Blocked practice feels easier. Interleaving builds flexibility. So why does this feel hard? Here's the important concept. All 4 of these strategies feel harder than rereading. That requires effort. But that effort is what makes them effective. The important thing to notice is that none of these strategies are really complicated. What makes them powerful is consistency. Small adjustments repeated over and over time. Learning doesn't improve because you work longer. It improves because you work differently. Let me say that again. Learning does not improve because you work longer. It improves because you work differently. The next is a practical application. So what does this look like in real life? So instead of 2 hours of rereading, try 30 minutes of retrieval practice. Review it again 2 days later, mix old and new material, and talk it out loud. Instead of highlighting a chapter, write down 5 questions from the material. Then answer it without looking at the book. Instead of waiting until the night before the exam, try 10-minute spaced reviews across the week. These are all small changes, but these small changes repeated consistently is what creates educational transformation. The next is to reframe. If learning has felt harder than it should be, the answer is not, I'm not capable. Most often, I've been using the wrong tools. So when you shift from passive exposure to active learning, active engagement, learning feels different. Not easier, but clearer. It's the clarity that reduces you feeling overwhelmed. So in closing, learning is not about doing more. It's about doing what works. Active retrieval, spaced practice, elaboration, interleaving. Small shifts repeated intentionally. That's how learning becomes sustainable. If today's episode resonated with you, follow our podcast on your favorite platform and give us a like on YouTube and subscribe. But again, as most importantly, share this material with someone who might find it helpful. I'm Dr. Ken Feldman, and this is Learning Reframed, Education Without the Noise. See you next time.